Because of her beauty, a girl becomes the target of jealousy from three other girls. Consumed by envy, the three of them throw acid on the girl's face, which disfigures her. The victim later commits suicide, but shortly after, the three girls start experiencing a series of mysterious mishaps. It seemed as though a mysterious force was punishing them for their cruel act and seeking revenge on those who committed the horrible deed. The story begins on a mysterious island, where a huge cruise ship was sailing. There was present our main protagonist. While having his dinner, the young detective Hajam suddenly heard a woman's blood-curdling scream that mixed with the deafening sound of thunder outside. Everyone rushed towards the sound of the scream. Once they got to the opera house, the horrific sight they saw made everyone freeze on the spot. The huge chandelier that was hanging from the ceiling had crashed on the floor. Under the broken crystal pieces, there was a girl who was barely alive. Kenzu, the manager of the opera house, thought that it was just an unfortunate accident, but Hajim quickly showed him that it was not. The wire that held the chandelier had a cut that was too clean. Someone must have cut it with a knife. Hajim concluded that the girl named Hidaka, who was crushed under the falling chandelier, had been murdered. Everyone was shocked beyond words. How could this happen? Nobody had exited the restaurant before or after hearing the scream. But the chef Agata suddenly remembered something. He told everyone that the day before Hajim and the others arrived, a man named Kagetsu checked into the inn. But when they arrived, Kagetsu was wrapped with bandages. After checking in, he did not exit his room. Upon hearing this, everyone quickly ran towards Kagetsu's room. When they entered his room, they were greeted with the sight of his room being messed up. Miyuki screamed when she found out what was written on the bathroom wall. It had a message written with blood. Upon seeing the message, Hajime immediately changed his expression. He suddenly remembered what happened not long before Kagetsu's arrival. Hajime had accepted Miyuki's request to go and visit the island with the school drama club. The school drama club was rehearsing the play called The Phantom of the Opera. It was a classic Gothic mystery murder. During the rehearsals, Hajime had talked with Mitsuhiko, who told him that originally the role of the leading lady had been played by Fayuko, the younger sister of Ryoji. Mitsuhiko had been engaged to Fayuko. Just before the rehearsals started, Fayuko's face had been severely burned with sulfuric acid. Later, the doctors managed to save her life, but her face was disfigured. This was a devastating blow for her. A few days later, Fayuko's friends and family came to visit her. She managed to put on a brave face and sang the final aria from the hospital roof. After that, she said that she had been burned by the flames of hell but wanted heaven. Fayuko then jumped off the roof to end her misery. That was why the sight of the message written with blood reminded Hajime of the unfortunate death of Fayuko. Sendai immediately believed that it was the vengeful spirit of Fayuko that had taken Hidaka's life. His belief made Mitsuhiko feel more scared. He quickly convinced the others that it would be best to leave the island that very night. The others followed his lead and they all went to the island's harbor. But to their dismay, the boat they had used had vanished. It seemed that someone wanted them to stay on the island. The whole group was more frightened than ever. After returning to the opera house attached in, everyone began believing that the vengeful spirit of Fayuko had taken the lives of the victims. But Ryoji thought that his little sister would never hurt any defenseless person. Hajime agreed with him. He was yet to unveil the killer's motives, but he was quite sure that the killer had been on the island. Everyone went to their respective rooms to try and get some rest. As they were getting ready to sleep, Miyuki suddenly heard the sound of heels clicking on the floorboards. To her horror, she realized that her room's door had somehow opened. The next moment, a masked figure appeared and grabbed her by the neck. After letting out a blood-curdling scream, Miyuki woke up from her nightmare. But just then, the knocking sound suddenly started. The next moment, a masked figure appeared outside her window. The next morning, Hajime was awakened by the sound of a ringing telephone. As soon as he picked up the receiver, his sleeping expression quickly changed. He immediately ran towards the back of the inn. Another murder had occurred. It was Kuryu, the actress who had been the understudy for Fayuko. It was assumed that she had committed suicide, but Hajime immediately told everyone that it was not a suicide. There was no platform or anything from which the victim could have jumped or hanged herself. This time, Miyuki suddenly realized that the masked figure that had appeared before her was real. The realization also dawned on the others. The method that had been used to kill Kuryu was the same one used in The Phantom of the Opera. Hajime told everyone that it was a locked room murder. Kuryu's room had been locked from the inside, which meant that either the murderer or the victim exited through the open window. The footprints on the floor were proof of this, but when he looked at the footprints, he realized that apart from those belonging to Kuryu, there were no other prints. This showed that Kuryu had exited her room willingly before being strangled to death. Agata assumed that according to the play's plot, the next victim would be dragged into the sewer. Just then, Hajime noticed something strange about Takamori. The actress was sweating like there was no tomorrow. Hajime suspected that she was the one who had killed Kuryu. but he was uncertain as to whether a man named Kagetsu had really existed. That night Miyuki came to Hajim's room and told him that water drops had been constantly dripping from the ceiling in her room. Hajime thought that maybe there was a leaking tap upstairs, but Miyuki said that nobody's room was upstairs. This was odd, as no one had ever used the tap upstairs. Hajime immediately suspected something and decided to investigate, but upon examining the water drops he realized that there were traces of blood in it. Everyone soon came to his room. In the end, they discovered Agata's body in the bathtub. At first, everyone thought that Agata had drowned, but Hajime told them that the blow to his head was the cause of his death. Hajime also noticed that one of Agata's fake fingernails was missing. This led Hajime to conclude that Agata had been murdered elsewhere and his body moved to the bathtub, but something troubled Hajime about the murder scene as compared to the previous two. Agata's murder had too many loopholes. This made Hajime think that the killer might have acted on impulse this time. All of a sudden Takamori became emotional. Her emotional state made Hajime suspect her even more. He chased after her and wanted to know what she knew. But she finally broke down and told him what she knew. Fuyuko's deformity had not been caused by an accident, as many people thought. Takamori had conspired with Kuryu and Hidaka to scare Fuyuko by throwing sulfuric acid on her. Unfortunately, something had gone wrong and Fuyuko's face was permanently disfigured. After hearing Takamori's story, Hajime told Miyuki to look after Takamori while he investigated alone. He went through all the evidence he had gathered and put together the motive behind every suspect. He concluded that whoever killed Fuyuko must have been close to her. As he was thinking, Hajime walked into the kitchen and discovered Fuyuko's diary. Curious, he opened the diary and began reading. Fuyuko's diary mentioned a person whose name started with the letter R. The only person who fitted this description was Fuyuko's older brother Ryoji. Meanwhile, Miyuki was trying to console Takamori in her room. Suddenly, the masked figure broke through the window and stormed into the room. The next moment, the blood-curdling scream that came from the room made Hajime rush towards it. As he arrived, he stopped the masked figure just in time. The masked figure, whose target had been Takamori, decided to go after Hajime instead. But for some unknown reason, the masked figure decided not to harm Hajime. The masked figure turned around and stormed out of the room. Everyone rushed to the room after hearing the scream, but the masked figure was already gone by the time they arrived. Ryoji believed that the masked figure had become aware that they were all coming and had jumped into the sea to escape. Hajime soon discovered that the windowsill was full of dust. The moment he looked at the windowsill, he realized what the masked figure had done. Later, he took Miyuki to the opera house's stage and showed her how the curtain worked. He then told everyone what he had discovered. During his investigation, Hajime had discovered that whenever the curtain was rolled down, the broken pieces of the chandelier formed a straight line. This meant that when Hidaka was killed, the curtain must have been rolled down. But when everyone arrived at the opera house after the scream, the curtain had been raised. Hajime wondered if something had happened during his investigation. He remembered hearing the bell on the curtain ring when he was at the restaurant. But when he went to the projection room with Miyuki, he discovered Agata's missing fingernail. All the pieces of evidence were beginning to make sense to Hajime. The only thing that did not make sense to him was the fact that if the killer's motive was revenge, then why had Takamori escaped? At that time, the opera house owner, Kenzu, announced that he had managed to get a boat from the mainland. This meant that rescue workers would arrive at the harbor. Suddenly, Hajime realized that the crossbow had been mounted on the fireplace, but Kenzu told Hajime that he had just mounted the crossbow. These facts sparked even more questions in Hajime's head. Without wasting any time, he ordered everyone to take their seats in the dining hall. He told them to sit according to his instructions. After everyone had taken their seats, Hajime finally told everyone that the man who had checked into the inn under the alias Kagetsu was the murderer behind all the killings. According to Hajime, Kagetsu had exited the island the day he checked, in using an inflatable kayak that had been hidden in his bag. But the following day, Kagetsu had returned to the island disguised as one of Hajime's friends. Everyone immediately objected to his allegations. They told Hajime that it would have been impossible for Kagetsu to commit the murders. When Hidaka was killed, everyone was in the restaurant. This meant that Kagetsu could not have killed her. Hajime calmly told everyone that the scream they had heard that night had not been real. It had been a recorded message. This also meant that when they heard the scream, Hidaka was still alive. The killer must have pretended to follow them while investigating the scream. The killer must have gone to the opera house and waited for the right moment to kill Hidaka. In order to cover his tracks, the killer must have pulled the lever that controlled the curtain. The lever must have caused the bell to ring, which signified the opening of the curtain. This meant that the killer would have the opportunity to cut the wire that held the chandelier and kill Hidaka. After killing her, the killer would have pulled the lever again to close the curtain. Then the killer would have returned to the group as if he had heard the scream. Later, the killer would have tried to remove the tape that had the recorded scream, but Agata would have discovered him. This would have forced the killer to kill Agata in self-defense. The killer would have used the same method to kill Kuryu. He would have attached a rope to her window and pretended to call her. When Kuryu stuck her head out the window, the killer would have pulled the rope and strangled her to death. The killer would have used the victim's shoe to hang her body from a branch. The killer's plan for escaping would have involved making everyone believe that he had jumped into the sea. This would have given the killer the opportunity to continue with his murderous plans. This would also explain why the killer's mask was floating on the water. Everyone was left speechless after hearing Hajim's theory. The killer had planned to kill another person that night. He would have waited for the right time and opportunity to kill them. In his final statement, Hajim ordered everyone to stay in their seats and not to make any rash moves. When the time came for the killer to reveal himself, he would do so. In the dining hall, everyone was seated waiting for the clock to strike 10 in the evening. All of a sudden, Sendai cried out in pain and fell to the floor. Hajim immediately told everyone that Sendai was the killer. He had been the one who had set the crossbow trap in the room. But when the clock struck 10 in the evening, the crossbow would have fired an arrow. Hajim showed everyone that the dining hall always had the same seats. He also told them that he had unraveled Sendai's trick after knowing the killer's plan. He had placed everyone in different seats in order to expose the killer. He had placed Sendai in the seat that previously belonged to Takamori. The killer's plan would have failed because of these simple moves. The killer's footprints that were found on the windowsill were also proof of his identity. When everyone saw the killer jump out the window, they would have expected to see muddy footprints on the floor. But the ground on the windowsill was clean. This meant that it would have been impossible for the killer to jump out of the window. It would also mean that the killer never jumped into the sea. The mask that had been seen floating on the water was also a trick that the killer had used to mislead them. Sendai was now speechless after hearing Hajim's words. He took out a knife and used it to point Takamori hostage. He was angry at her for making him endure all this misery, but he would have never forgiven himself if he had not taken his revenge. He wanted to tell everyone about the day he first met Fayuko. When Sendai was a young street thug, he had spent his nights brawling in alleys. He had always believed that his life would forever be spent in the pits of darkness. But one day he met Fayuko. She had been like an angel sent to him from heaven. She always treated everyone with kindness. She gave him support and encouraged him to change his ways. The two of them had spent happy times together. But this joy was short-lived as Kuryu, Hidaka, and Takamori conspired to ruin Fayuko's life. They had thrown sulfuric acid on her, which caused her face to disfigure. Neither Sendai nor Fayuko had known that they had been the cause of this misery until they overheard Kuryu, Hidaka, and Takamori talking about it. They soon realized that it was these three people who had been responsible for ruining Fayuko's life. But the sight of the beautiful Fayuko made Takamori and the others feel even more miserable. This prompted them to seek revenge. Fayuko later committed suicide and Sentai became consumed with hatred. He wanted to make the three girls pay for what they had done to Fayuko. After telling everyone this, Sendai pointed the knife at Takamori's throat. He wanted to kill her, but Hajim quickly rushed to stop him. He told Sendai that she did not deserve to die. Fayuko had committed suicide because she did not want to live a life of hatred and malice. She had wanted to leave behind all negativity and go to heaven. She had wanted to stay pure and kind before going to heaven. These words deeply touched Sendai's heart. He wanted to kill himself after realizing the true reason why Fayuko had committed suicide. But before he could do so, he dropped Takamori hostage and ran towards the window. Everyone chased after him and stopped him just before he jumped out the window. Sendai repeated the same words that Fayuko had said before she jumped to her death. Then he jumped out the window. Everyone desperately tried to save him, but it was already too late. Sendai had lost all hope after committing such horrible acts. He had wanted to join Fayuko in heaven, but he knew that he would never be able to. This was because of the innocent life he had taken. Watching Sendai's lifeless body fall to the ground, Takamori regretted everything that had happened. She wished that she had not let jealousy consume her for even a day. She painfully realized the terrible effect that jealousy could have on people's lives. True redemption only comes from within. No one can achieve salvation through revenge. It is only through the goodness in our hearts that we can protect ourselves against hatred and not descend into the depths of darkness.